In this part of the Final Frontier tutorial, we are going to look at putting an invisible barrier, like a wall, around the edge of your playing screen or your room so that objects can bounce off the side without going out of bounds. So in order to do that, we create an object which has a solid sprite, which is solid but invisible. So let's go ahead and do that. We need to create a new sprite, and we can call this one SPR wall because we'll use that to create a wall. And then we'll load the sprite from our resources called wall. You'll see it's just a red square. You could make your own type of wall. And notice also that it's 16 by 16. So what we want to do when we create the object that goes along with this, and we'll call this OBJ wall. Again, remember your file naming conventions. We're going to make this not visible but solid. Now I'm going to go back to the sprite here because I've made it transparent so you aren't actually able to see it. So I've unticked the transparency in the sprite. It will be, though, not visible and solid. So now what we're going to do is go into our room, make sure that your snap is set to 16 by 16 because remember that wall sprite is 16 by 16. And then we can just place our wall object all around the edge of the room. Now it's a good idea to make sure that you've expanded your room viewing area so that you can see the whole thing, and otherwise you might put a wall where you didn't mean to. Now if you hold down, you can simply click, and that will place instances of the wall, or you can hold down the shift key and drag. So if you see, we're making a barrier around the edge of the room. Now don't worry that you can see it while you're putting it on. And if it says this, there are instances or tiles outside the room, should I remove them? Yes, it's just when I was dragging I went a little bit outside the room and so it removes them for you. Now if we just run this for a test, you'll notice that you don't actually see that barrier because we've made it not visible. Right. If you see, our spaceship is still going through, and this is what we're going to do next, is make the spaceship bounce off of that wall. So we've got the wall, and now we need to make sure that the spaceship, when it runs into the wall, bounces and turns around. So the next thing we want to do is go into that spaceship object, and we want to add a collision event. So what happens when the spaceship collides with object wall? What we want it to do is do a bounce action. So this is the bounce. And we can just leave the default that it's not precisely and that it bounces against solid objects. So now that we've added some programming to our spaceship, let's test it. I still should be able to move my spaceship around. By the way, if you aren't able to use your arrow keys as expected, it's probably because you haven't put the focus into this window, so you actually need to click there with your mouse. And then you can use your arrow keys. Now let's just see what happens when it runs into the wall. Notice that it bounces independently. I'm not manipulating the spaceship at all. Just test it against another wall. And when it hits the bottom wall, it should again bounce. So we'll save that, and that's enough for this tutorial. The next one we'll look at duplicating objects.